Hello, this is Fam Electric Ghost. Do I have Dream Collective on the line?
Hello.
Hi,
Can you
do you hear me?
Hi.
Yeah, I hear you. Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, this is kind of a different technology. It's primarily a smartphone technology.
Yeah.
So it usually works best in that way. Not that you can't use a mic, but sometimes it might not work on certain mics.
Okay.
So do I have the whole band or different people in the band?
Yeah, we're all here on the same phone. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, it works. So we're starting the call right now. You can see it's recording. So Let me just do a little brief intro. I'm Fam Electric Ghost. I'm a podcast interviewer and I'm a musician myself. I've been doing this since 2018. We interview bands worldwide, and we're about 29,000 listeners worldwide. This is not recorded live. It's published after the fact on 11 different platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcast. So I welcome you guys to the program. Are you guys in Bristol, UK right now?
We're in Bristol, yeah.
Yeah, so you guys are an experimental electronica band that kind of you explore many genres, so you're not just electronica, but yeah, we want to talk to you about the questions we sent you, and I do see you have a new single out, and so we'll get into that as well.
Okay, great.
So we'll probably start talking about the first set of questions we get onto, and whoever wants to take it on first, let me know. When did you first get into music? Whoever in the band wants to take that question, and like what age did you get into instrumental or vocal music?
Yeah, sure. I'll go for that. Pretty much since birth. I first got into music, when I was a child, and my dad would play guitar a lot and play music like the Beatles and just loads of old bands. And then I took up the guitar at about age 7, and then I learnt the piano.
So did you find that guitar and piano are like really good for as writing instruments as a songwriter, or were you going at it just to learn the instruments, maybe not thinking of songwriting, but were you always kind of into like thinking you want to be a songwriter?
To be honest, yeah, that did actually come later. I am much into technique and guitar technique, and I think sometimes like people pick up in listening to Dream Collective music, like the kind of chords that I use and stuff. So I think I wanted to become a songwriter actually during like high school kind of time, when I met other musical people.
So do you find that does the piano lend itself better for songwriting, or the guitar, just depending on, maybe it depends on what type of song you're writing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we all kind of dabble in both. I think Gwyn has particularly taken an interest with like doing synthy stuff now, and you can play a bit of keys, can't you?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that was Phoebe's, and me and Kate are a brother and sister, and sort of grew up in a more folk realm, and then slowly moved to doing this more progressive, like electronic music.
So when you say folk, you start more with just acoustic guitar?
Yeah, growing up, it was nearly always just acoustic, and then
I learnt the harp when I was I started learning it when I was 12, and that I think that really influenced my songwriting in the way that it transposes to piano as well. So I think that kind of opened up the door for me writing songs on piano, from transitioning from the harp to that.
Have you ever used the harp integrated into the current Dream Collective, or you just transition totally?
We have tried that. We've used it in the past. We're hoping to mic it up with some interesting pedals as well.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to bring orchestral instruments into kind of like a dream pop or electronic music. It's always cool to bring acoustic instruments into any kind of setting, but it's interesting if you have the ability to play a harp. That's pretty interesting. I think tones that you can get.
On one track, we've used like software harp, but yeah, it'd be really nice to get some proper recordings.
I think those acoustic instruments really add to the texture of the songs and that more like natural feeling that we're trying to create within our music alongside this more electronic sound. It's quite an interesting combination of the sort of natural and then the man-made, like where those two worlds meet.
Yeah, it's kind of like the the ongoing conversation in electronic music today, with a lot of people is doing between pure analog synths and digital and sampled technologies, right?
Yeah.
Versus even like granular synthesis and like newfound sounds. I've talked to some experimental artists that like they go out and do field recordings, and then they use granular synthesis, and then maybe they'll bring in like a cello, or they'll bring in the actual flutes and orchestral instruments, and different winds and levels of percussion, African instruments, all kinds of cool stuff. I think it's always cool today to kind of have a hybrid, even though everybody can be on their workstation and grab any sound they want. It's still a good place to actually bring real, not real, but acoustic instruments into the mix. It's always interesting for me.
Yeah, and I think just audio in general, because I've been experimenting with using sort of various like sounds from the body, sampling different sounds with vocals, and just sort of being more creative with audio.
Yeah, like the whole field recordings are always really cool. I kind of grew up. I'm in my 50s, and I grew up listening to bands like Yes, and they went out into the woods and did field recordings. For like Close to the Edge. It kind of starts with a field recording from the woods.
Yep.
They actually captured the sound of the woods and then brought it into the record. And I've always been, Peter Gabriel used to do stuff like that with Genesis and on his own solo works. I've always been a big fan of very experimental type of concepts to doing. I even bands like Sun Ra jazz bands doing using a Moog, one of the first bands to actually use a Moog in the 50s. It's just anything that you can bring to the capability of grabbing human sounds, breaking glass, just newfound sounds, field recordings. I think it's just the age where you can do everything.
It's a very interesting way to experiment with what music is as well, and how you develop and create songs, I guess, and what those different emotions.
So when did you guys realize that you had a talent for music to the point where you wanted to create a band? And have you been in other bands before this band?
So me and Gwyn started making music together when we were quite young, because we grew up together. And then when I went to university, me and Phoebe met and created our previous band that was called Velvet Circus, which was a duo, which again was more folky. And then about a year ago now, we sort of combined the two projects and created the Dream Kollective, which has been a really lovely mix of what, like the old stuff that we used to do, combined with this new direction that we want to take the project in.
And so that gets, I guess, into the question of your influences, which some people like are into this question, or some people say, well, it's hard to kind of pin down, and some they don't like to kind of name check other bands because it fills it, boxes them in. But who are your influences or reference points for your music that you would feel comfortable talking about?
Wow, that is a big question. I mean, all of our influences are just so vast, so it's really hard to just like pinpoint one. Like I was saying, what with me coming from a Beatles, also a Yes background, and Kate and Gwyn sort of more folky like John Martin. It's about combining them all, really. Like Kate was saying, our writing style has also just changed so much as well. So I mean, I guess our main influences are like Joni, who have we said? Joni Mitchell, John Martin, Nick Drake, a guy called Fink, Rachel Samani, Kate Bush, Beatles, Bowie.
Oh, Nick Drake is great. I hardly ever hear anybody name check him. I'm very familiar with his work. I love Nick Drake's guitar playing. It's super unique.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too simple to say, but it's just his tone and the way he played is so interesting. And it has a really good, it seems like in this age, a lot of indie or alternative artists have name checked him like people name check the Velvet Underground or Alex Chilton and Big Star, which are these like sometimes they're bands that aren't popular in their time. And Nick was part of that, and like the Velvet Underground were part of that, and Alex Chilton's Big Star were kind of like a clone of the Beatles that came from the American South that inspired bands like the Replacements and Who's to Do and REM name check Big Star all the time, whether or not, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but yeah, it's interesting that you named that artist because it kind of brought up that kind of influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. That album, his album Pink Moon, is one that has been played a lot.
Oh, that's a great album. I love that record.
Yeah.
I probably wore it out.
Yeah, I think lyrically as well, what he does is wonderful.
So I think, yeah, it's hard to pin down in this kind of genre age, because people are crossing over, bringing fusion and country and hip hop and rock, and then having like a punk aesthetic. I like to describe things like, what I do with my sound, I call it expansive, which basically allows me to go like everywhere. So as an expansive sound experiments means I can pull in jazz, I can pull in classical, I can pull in anything. And so it's just like a new genre idea of like, I don't want to be bound by genre, so I'm just going to just be experimental and do whatever I want.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We've used that word.
Which I think actually, yeah. So like, I see on Spotify, I've only seen one of your songs. Is that the first release under your Kollective, or you have other places where people can find your music?
So far, that's our first single release, yeah, as this project.
So so I want to talk about Above and Below, because it has like what's really core about your sound with this song is you have really great harmonies, which reminds me of the kind of harmonization that the Beatles had, where I can kind of see that influence, but that kind of pop sensibility. But then there's the experimentation that you're talking about. And then I hear the folk, I hear the Beatles, I hear Yes, I hear Pink Moon. I do hear those influences. So it's like, do you guys all write the songs together, or does somebody, primary songwriter, and then everybody brings in their piece? Maybe to talk about how the song was crafted.
So this song, Above and Below, was written by me and Phoebe, about 5 years now, and started off as a way more folky acoustic guitar, really harmony based song. And then when we started this project, we sort of developed it to have a more electronic sound, and Gwyn did most of the producing on the track.
So yeah, I took the role as producer on that, and just looking at how we could make this hybrid and kind of bridge between the old stuff and the new direction.
Which is actually quite interesting regarding the sort of themes within the song, which are more sort of exploring space realms, and how electronic music kind of really plays well into that theme in a different way to how it did before as an acoustic track.
Yeah, generally sometimes it mixes up because it depends on the session. Like one time, I don't know, Gwyn might write a song and then bring it to us, and then we might put an input in, and then it all changes, and then we might all sometimes we do get together and then just try and create something on the spot, really. So it kind of varies.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah, so there's like it's interesting, like the old school way of bands putting together songs. I was watching a documentary, just for an example, like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They would just be in the studio all together and kind of just write it out. Bands like the Allman Brothers, that was like the standard. Like bands like Cream. The traditional kind of old school way of recording. Like a band comes in the studio and they all kind of contribute. Maybe somebody had a demo, but they all kind of contribute. But in modern technology, you could be across the pond and somebody could be on their DAW and have a WAV file and then send you the other part, and you overdub it and you never even met.
And it was that process essentially from out of lockdown and not actually being able to play in a room together, and we still wanted to be being productive with music, so we thought, let's do this. We'll send each other the audio, and then I sort of compiled it in Logic
Yeah, and I think based on lockdown, I think the cool technologies today. 'Cause I actually was doing this back in 2017. I actually had an album I did with an actress from Los Angeles, and I live in New Hampshire. And we never met. All we did is have Skype meetings, and she was in FL Studio, and I was working on hardware recording systems, and we just put together a whole record without ever meeting physically.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it was a precursor of like what happens now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
And I actually like that experience because now I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But do you feel that like when you're using that method, the pros and cons of it, did you have challenges with doing it that way? Did you have to, like, I found I had to have a Skype meeting with my collaborator to kind of, explain, exactly what I was getting at, or, to get into the nitty gritty when we're producing, and finalizing tracks. Did you still have to have that kind of thing, or you kind of left it to judgment and then have meetings after the fact? Or I don't know. Everybody has their own process.
I think it's definitely, it feels less organic, certainly, doing that separate, because you're sort of responding. People will send you something and you have that time to respond, but when you're in the moment, you can be constantly giving your input. So that really changes. In some ways, it kind of gives your input to the song a bit more of a clear voice, because you have your time to like put your part down and then send it on. So there's sort of benefits, there's sort of pros and cons to it.
Yeah, like I guess we were quite communicative. If there was definitely I don't know, someone might have come up with a melody line that someone else didn't think sounded right or something, but generally we would just check in quite frequently. So we always kind of knew what everybody was thinking. So yeah, it did manage to work quite well, I think.
I guess you have.
Yeah, I've been very interested in this time of seeing if there is, are the all the companies that create the DAWs, Logic and FL Studio and Ableton, would they ever think of creating live session capability?
Oh yeah,
So that if
you
you're
can
in
do
the
it with
DAW,
Pro Tools.
especially Pro Tools does have that now.
You can. There's ways you can collaborate. It's not, you can't record at the same time, but they have a function where you can set up a sort of, it's like you can make inputs into the same project and then upload them, and everyone will get them at the same time.
Yeah, I was talking more like actually having a live studio session.
Wow. Yeah.
Over like 5G or high powered Wi-Fi, where you could actually have that session and actually get a video response, so you could actually see somebody playing and hear them playing all at once, and record it into the DAW and have like a real session. It's not impossible. I'm an IT guy, so that's not a total impossibility. There are technologies that could allow that to happen. It's just nobody's ever said, well, why would I do that when I could just go to the studio?
Yeah.
But in this situation where people might not be able to for a while,
yeah,
it might start to happen.
Is it not the latency that becomes the issue that you?
The latency is the issue, but there are algorithms within the communication standards that could resolve that if there was a need to do it. It's kind of military level technology that could be appropriate.
Wow.
But whether or not somebody would want to take that and use it for that, but it's possible. It's not impossible. It's just people are like, why would they want to pay for that when you could do it, come together? But like what I'm saying is, because of the situation with the virus, is like it might end up happening,
which is cool.
We'll see. Yeah, it's kind of cool. So yeah, maybe more about the song in terms of like maybe I don't know the actual construction of it. Did it take? I guess it was an older song that you took and decided to kind of change it, or update it, or use it as like as part of this project. Is that your feeling that you're gonna maybe take some of your previous work and continue that kind of process, or create totally new work?
I think we've got a big sort of backlog of songs that we could potentially do that with. I think we all kind of have a sort of itching feeling to create some new stuff as well after playing those old songs for quite a few years now, and to see where the music takes us as this new project, I guess, and with a slightly different idea in mind of what kind of music we're creating. But yeah, we definitely will be using some of the old songs, I think.
Yeah.
As well.
Well, I like the result of how that song came about. And I think it is interesting when I've talked to a lot of musicians about like what they have in their, like, you know, their vault of stuff, and the way musicians, you know, singer songwriters, you know, develop ideas is like, it's like a writer. You know, I've heard that sometimes a writer might write, you know, 1,500 pages worth of material and then they knock it down to 700. Or if a musician has a mix and they have all these, you know, overdubs, but then when they get to the final track, they start pulling things out to kind of get to the true heart of the song. And it's really kind of in that construction. And so having reference points or having, you know, vault material that maybe the public doesn't know about, but as a songwriter, it's like a tool in your toolbox. And then there's the whole idea of starting off fresh, because starting off fresh with a whole new group, you know, is its own, you know, capability.
There's definitely an opportunity to revisit ideas, and maybe, you know, maybe not take entire songs, but even just little, you know, little ideas from melodies and lyrics that we can just, yeah, as you say, it's a tool that we can just lift if we're feeling creatively stuck. Or
Yeah, because I found as an artist, what I've done, you know, I'm like in my 50s, but I've been recording since I was like 17. And what I found is like with sampling today, so many people sample this and sample that. But what I found is like I go back in my back catalog of vault stuff and I resample my own material, which nobody probably ever heard, and do, you know, grid synthesis and stuff on it. And I can kind of reinvent myself. And it's really interesting because I actually, you know, a little side story. I was listening to Prince's like reissue of Sign of the Times, and there is a version of I'll Never Take the Place of Your Man. They actually wrote in '78, and it was actually released, you know, the album came out in '87, but he had a version of that song in 1978 that he went back and reworked to become like Sign of the Times level stuff. But he actually had that kind of '87 vibe in 1978. And so it was very interesting to hear that he had that kind of style that far ahead of his work. And so it's like that kind of got me interested in like, oh, you know, it is cool to kind of go back at in your old catalog and reimagine things.
Yeah, definitely. But you sort of hear it differently, don't you, when you look back on it as well, and maybe ideas that you weren't so keen on suddenly they sort of have this new sense of life.
So as this project had, before the lockdown, were you able to? Did this project exist? Were you ever able to do live shows as Dream Kollective, or this is such a new project you haven't been able to do that?
It was just kicking off, basically. we had 3 gigs, one in Wales, which was like the debut, and we had an hour set for those, and then we did 2 more in Bristol, and had a bunch lined up for the summer, which obviously all got cancelled.
Yeah, this is kind of like the summer that I finally got a booking agent to be able to play in Europe, and then all Americans are told we can't go anywhere. So I run into the same thing. I finally got a booking agent that could send me to where people actually listen to my music, because I live in New Hampshire, and I get more people in Europe and in Switzerland and Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, you know, tend to listen to the type of music I do. And then I got a booking agent that could get me there, and then this happened. Corona happens. I think it happens to every musician this year. It's like, okay, like the great slam in my career. But
Totally.
So have you guys been like figuring out strategies to like focus? I most of the bands I've talked to this year have doubled down on recording, doubled down on, you know, their internet presence, their web stores, their merch. Have you guys come up with different strategies for what you're going to do? Like your focus, is it primarily on the music, or the image of your music, or the presentation of your music?
Well, we have a manager, Ella, behind us, really, who kind of is really good at giving us like a bit of a push, because I think mainly we're sort of quite music focused. However, it is good to basically try and take hold of what, utilize things like Instagram and merch and Spotify as well, to kind of reach out to people. So we've been coming up with ideas for merchandise for sure, and also to prep for gigs. I know that we're going back into a lockdown now, but there was a couple of places doing socially distanced gigs. So we were going to reach out and hopefully have a couple of those. But obviously now we don't know when. But so Ella kind of encourages us a lot with Instagram as well, just trying to keep it as interesting as possible. And other than that, we have a couple of songs that we've recorded that we're working on at the moment. So
So are you guys planning on releasing, in this typical age of the playlist, are you going to primarily release singles, or you're aiming toward having these singles become like an EP or an album?
I think for a while, I think we're just going to put all our energy into some singles. But then I guess I'd be working towards maybe we'll just do singles until we feel like we've got an album there. But we'll just we'll take them one at a time at the moment.
And if you guys looked into, like, I know on Instagram, and I do it, lots of bands do it, they'll take advantage of the fact you can go live and do like in studio from home little performances or little clips, or even go on Facebook Live or Twitch. Have you guys thought about configuring a way to do like online shows?
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I think that would be a good thing to work towards within the next few months. We were on the in Hale Mai, there's a festival called How the Light Gets In, and we were involved in an online festival there. But,
that seems to be more of a trend, I think, to be going into 2021. I think a lot of things are going to end up having online presences. I don't know if the big festivals are going to start planning for that, but I've been approached by a bunch of different people to do stuff like that. And the interesting thing is the way I'm like a one-person band, and so since my whole story since 2016, I used to be on Periscope all the time. Like every Saturday night, I do like an hour for my home studio, and that's how I kind of built up my rep. And then I got this podcast. But it's like I've been investing in like multiple cameras and video mixer equipments and green screens to kind of build up what I can do. Because I kind of doubled down instead of paying for the minivan and the U-Haul and the money to go to New York. I said, well, I might as well just do it all from the house, because I'm not getting to New York anytime soon.
We're just in the process of applying for some funding from the Arts Council, and in that we're kind of factoring in sort of the funding to get a new set together, and obviously we have to think of whether it's going to be realistic to do it in a venue. So it's kind of factoring in how we can maybe collaborate on doing like a live stream performance of that set when it's ready.
Yeah, because
we are looking at those.
Yeah, the technology is getting really good. Since I like I said, I've been doing it since 2016, but the abilities to have like video mixers that automatically switch from camera to camera, so you could have like 3 web cameras that are pretty good quality, having 3 different angles and actually switching automatically, and doing different focuses while you're doing it, where you don't have to have somebody running it. And the ability to capture really good audio off of mixing boards and put it over the net. The technologies are getting more affordable than it ever was. It's just interesting that this stuff is coming about at the same time that this thing happened, that these technologies actually exist. It's just a matter of bands. One thing I've seen is bands that are even trying to get into it have kind of pointed out that a lot of bands are kind of built off the feedback with the crowd. And the problem with doing home performance is you don't get that feedback. And so if you're a band that kind of depends on that to feel the crowd to kind of help the performance, then it makes it like you're missing that leg. And so it makes it kind of not comfortable. It doesn't feel satisfying to do that performance without that crowd interaction. What are your kind of thoughts about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest reasons for doing music in a way, is the live performance, I find anyway, and just the energy you get from it, and the feeling of working up to playing a show, and how you can interact and sort of talk to an audience through your music. Yeah, sort of, I'm really missing that at the moment, for sure. I don't know how you guys find it.
Yeah, definitely. It's never going to live up to doing it live, but then it is, again, it's just like within the awful situation that we're in, it's like we've got to do something. It's better to do that than not do anything, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually saw a band from Colorado called Tennis, and what they did is they got a venue as a full band, you know, a recording kind of studio situation where they didn't have any crowd at all. And they just did a live stream with the full band being able to play on a stage with a green screen and, you know, all kinds of camera angles. And they charged like $15 for it. And they're a pretty, you know, awesome indie band in the US. They kind of have a Carpenter's vibe. And they did a great like hour and a half set. And, you know, a lot of their fans paid for it. And, you know, I was one of them. And it you know, they didn't have a crowd to have the interaction, but I guess they just really rehearsed their material and got it down. So they just kind of got into the vibe of them playing on the stage, and they were able to kind of carry it off with a lot of energy. And I know it's probably hard because without anybody there, except for the camera guys, that's probably hard to do.
Yeah, definitely. It's not the same. But it's just, I guess it might strengthen all. I mean, I guess if you're on your own, it's a bit different. But like, I guess with the three of us, it would kind of strengthen our musical intuition with ourselves, I guess. Sometimes it's quite nice to connect with your bandmates, you know, and like,
yeah, it's kind of like
it's
kind of like you're doing a live recording session, but you have anybody. Like if that might give you a little more inspiration than just doing it in front of your bedroom, you know. But if these venues that are allowing, you know, bands to film or stream without crowds, you know, is another alternative. I don't know if they're offering that in where you guys are. In the States, there are, you know, studios that are starting to do that, and bands starting to jump on it. So I don't know if that's something you guys would look into.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if it is a thing here.
I mean, I'm sure we've been thinking about doing something down those lines. We've got various options of places we could do an interesting video, maybe not necessarily at a venue, but and using that idea, definitely.
So what are your thoughts on, you know, the way the industry is with streaming and social media? You mentioned Instagram. It seems like Instagram is a very artist or musician friendly platform. It's like it's my primary platform. You know, I am on other platforms, but I find that Instagram for musicians seems to be a really great place to like push, you know, some of your material, your visuals, connect with other musicians. Like every musician I've ever interviewed on this podcast has come from Instagram.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like in the past few years as well, Instagram's really taken off and is probably much more popular with the sort of younger generation than Facebook is now as well. And I really like the visual element of it. I think that draws people in.
Yeah, I guess I think we've had a lot of connections as well, you know, you being one of them. There's been a lot of people that have kind of interacted, like if we've needed illustration or like videos. Instagram is a really great way, especially I don't know anymore how much hashtags help, but like we've definitely been trying to utilize the best kind of ones that we think are the most relatable to us. But yeah, did you mention Spotify? Did you say what our thoughts are on that?
Yeah, like any streaming service, like Spotify, you know, just a disclaimer, Anchor FM, we are part of Spotify, so I'm actually like an employee of Spotify. But Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, what are your opinions of any streaming service, whether it's Apple or Tidal, in terms of the way the industry is versus like the old brick and mortar method of you had to sell your tape or your vinyl, your CD, you had to get through the gate of you actually getting to a label to even get out the door. What are your thoughts about the whole way the way music is distributed today?
I know that a lot of artists that are doing maybe a bit better from their music and aren't very happy with the current state of it, because it does eliminate the sort of, I guess, the way that people used to make quite a lot of money from the selling of recorded music. So some people are really losing out, but I suppose for up and coming artists, then it is just incredibly useful to be able to get your stuff out there and really accessible. So I think, yeah, and I suppose as artists coming into that new wave, we're kind of trying to embrace that.
Yeah, it's not like in the old times where you could hand out tapes and stuff. Like, it would be, I think the way forward now is that you've got to basically get yourself out on Spotify and kind of reach out to a lot of people, and then you will, people come to gigs. I think gigs were actually the main way, like, earning power in modern times, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's been a real kind of double whammy during this time. Is most of the bands I've been in, we made our money playing at the local bar or going to New York and playing like the club friendly circuit. To New York, where I live in the Northeast, I live in New Hampshire, and New York is the place you go. If you're a band, Boston's cool, but New York, like, there's so many clubs you can get any kind of style you can play. And you can get, 300 people, 2,000 people, 3,000 people, in these clubs. And you get, and people want to hear new music. So it's a scene where you can go with original music and people don't boo you off the stage. They want to hear it. And so that was like the primary, money maker for new, the type of work electronic music I'm into is the scene. Like, where I live in New Hampshire, there's no scene. You got to go to New York to get in the audience, or you got to go on Spotify to get a worldwide audience, or SoundCloud or any of those other platforms. It's kind of where I got my audiences, on SoundCloud, then Spotify, and all these other platforms. And then it's kind of like the radio. Like, in the old days, I used to go and get college radio stations like UMass and Harvard and Northeastern to play my music on the college radio. And get in with the college DJs and get it into that kind of underground radio scene. And that's what Spotify and SoundCloud seem to be like now compared to what I used to do.
Yeah.
Do you guys still try to get into underground radio, or is there any kind of underground radio, or is it all internet radio?
Wow, that's a tricky one. I think we know a couple of people. Something like Linktree?
Yeah, there's quite a few independent stations in Bristol, and we know a few people amongst that. We haven't actually done much networking in those with them yet, but we'd definitely be looking to do that.
Yeah, because people are so into the net now that they sometimes like neglect the existing radio that still exists.
Yeah.
And it's like another way to hit, because there are some people who are kind of finding out about radio, because people can, like, the way people find out about vinyl, and they're like, oh, there's these little underground college radio stations, or these little underground AM stations that are doing this interesting music, and they find an interesting DJ that's introducing them. Because I grew up with the DJs introducing me to like REM, or to like Black Flag, or to like a punk band like The Clash. I heard it on a like UMass college radio station, and that's Michael Stipe. I never heard anything like that before. I never heard a band like an REM, and that's the only way I got introduced to it, was because there was some kid at the station that said, "Hey, you got to check this out." But I guess on the net with SoundCloud is like that today. But. Or Spotify is like that, for the underground, like SoundCloud seems to be like the underground, and then Spotify, you kind of get to the next tier. What are your thoughts about the different like tiers of streaming? With like the SoundCloud people, and the people who are on the SoundCloud platform or other platforms, or even like YouTube, people start there with a video and it goes viral, and or even like they go on to all the other type of capabilities out there.
Yeah,
I guess you want to be on all of them, really. You want to,
yeah,
because they're so well connected between them that if you have your fingers in all the pies, that your point to, and the more you do that, the more everyone's sort of shared amongst that community.
Yeah, like I don't know. Spotify makes me think it's a bit like you were saying actually with the tiers and stuff. Spotify is like the playlist recommendations. SoundCloud is generally like someone going, "I've just uploaded a track." It's a bit like a starting platform. SoundCloud felt to me.
Yeah, it is kind of underground.
DJs use it.
Yeah, it's like underground.
Yeah,
within electronic, there's a whole, there's a lot of rappers. There's a lot of SoundCloud gets associated with rappers, but I was on the platform before the rappers, and it was a lot of of experimental, stuff that I still do, right? And it was interesting. I actually had people from these different podcast platforms. I actually started on a different podcast platform. They actually approached me because of my SoundCloud, because I had, at the time, like 90,000 people were listening to me on the underground electronic channel. And then they said, "Hey, you want to do a podcast where you interview electronic bands?" And I said, "Okay." And I started doing that. And then I ended up moving over here. But yeah, it was like, you never know what kind of opportunity you have. And I never knew that would happen. I was just doing it because I like to do music. But it just opened up that I got to be a podcast host because somebody found me and asked me if I wanted to do it.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's just interesting today. You never know what's going to happen with these platforms because there's so many different things going on. Have you guys thought about visually, because you have a very interesting sound that kind of lends itself to visuals. Are you working toward like videos and visual representations of your sound?
We are, yeah, we're very interested in, well, I suppose beginning with the live performances, we've collaborated with artists before, sort of doing live projections and stuff. And currently for Above and Below, we've got some filmmakers making an animation video.
So you are going to have a video to go with it.
We will do, yeah, hopefully by Christmas. So yeah, we're definitely interested in developing the visual side of it. I think it's a key part of the project, actually, is how we visualize the music.
So when you played live, did you have like screens up projecting visuals to go with what you were doing?
We did, yeah. We had an old school overhead projector that an artist was playing around with organic sort of sticks and leaves and things and making shapes that were then projected onto us. So it was a live response to the music.
Yeah, sounds kind of like Warhol, like you've ever heard about the Warhol factory and the Velvets. They used to run Warhol like visual experiments behind the Velvet Underground at the factory, like the famous like scene there where Warhol brought this kind of proto punk band in there, the Velvets, and he ran his art behind them. And then had models on stage and actors kind of doing this kind of strange, pre-MTV, experience that actually Bowie was very much impressed with and actually created like the scene that, kind of spawned Ziggy Stardust. It's from that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really key to the whole project, actually, that it's important to mention, like, about collaboration, because we're kind of really looking to see how we can network with other creatives and like how we can support, how those different art forms support each other, which I think is really important.
I think that, they go so well hand in hand that, for me anyway, it's hard to kind of separate them. I often see music when I'm writing a song very visually, almost like scenes in a film. So for me, they kind of have to go
That's
together.
interesting, because that's been my whole kind of theme ever since I read something about Hendrix and Electric Ladyland. They asked him, like, how would you describe it? Because, if you listen to Electric Ladyland, you hear like birds, you hear this cosmic stuff, you hear all these weird things that kind of lend itself to visuals. And he said it's a sound painting. And that kind of stuck in my head. There's like, oh, well, he sees like his music as like a painting. And then I also saw a documentary with George, the Beatles producer, and he indicated that he saw the same thing. There's like, he said, like, I could have recorded the Beatles like they were in Berlin, but I kind of thought of the studio like Monet thinks of a canvas, and the studio allows me to kind of paint the colors of the sound, so they're not going to sound exactly like they would in Berlin. We're going to use the studio to create the work, and that's where you kind of get the Sgt. Pepper's idea. And it kind of also had come out of the fact that George Martin had produced Peter Sellers records, which are comedy records that had orchestration and special effects and all kinds of other stuff on them. And the Beatles were actually aware of that, and they kind of came together where this idea of having like, this visual sound, and you kind of feel that with Sgt. Pepper's. You get this idea of a sound painting coming across. Pink Floyd took it further, and other bands took it further. But yeah, I've always thought of that even going back to my example with Warhol in the Factory and the Velvets, I've always had that kind of idea that video and art and acting and stagecraft is part of being a musician.
Definitely,
I definitely agree. I think as well, because the project's based around dreams and dream interpretation and exploring our dream worlds visually, the visual element of that is really important to create these kind of surreal realms that the music's inspired by. And quite an interesting thing.
Well, I'm very looking forward to when your video is going to be out. Do you have a target date?
I think roughly before Christmas, but we were very conscious of, because they're doing all stop frame animation, so it might take quite a long time. But it looks quite amazing.
That stop motion,
what they're doing.
That stop motion is
very
awesome.
excited.
You remember, if you think about what the way it was used in like Sledgehammer, with the kind of claymation stop motion, that's always very, very powerful. I've always been a big fan. And when MTV actually had a lot of artists and thinking about what video should be, and you get Peter Gabriel and you get these really amazing videos that took an advantage of bringing cutting edge directors and not just trying to sell the record, but actually create a piece of art that helped sell the record. But that was part of it was actually having an artist interpret the song, and then it's really encouraging that you guys are in that kind of mode, because that's a really cool place to be. And I have not talked to a lot of bands in the last 2 years that are coming from the space that you're coming from, which is very encouraging, because that's something I personally like to look at or listen to, is art bands that come from that direction.
That's good to hear. It's nice to hear.
Yeah,
thank you.
So is there anything you would like to tell your fans that maybe I haven't asked you that you would like to bring to their attention?
Oh wow, you've just got to stay tuned right now.
we've got our own podcast, actually. It's maybe worth mentioning, which is scheduled to be released in December.
Oh, cool.
And that's called What Do They Mean? So we're kind of sharing our education in dreams and sort of learning more about them, so we can inform our writing.
Is that video or audio?
That will be audio, yeah. With the potential of creating some videos. We're thinking if we get this Arts Council funding, we'll be able to develop that side of the project more, to maybe have some sort of interesting visual, which will then be collaborating with more artists, which is another side of the project, which maybe we could mention, is that we're really keen to encourage other artists to collaborate with us if they'd like to, in some form. And it's just really good to see where the different projects take you with different artists, and different ideas that are brought to
Yeah, I
the
think
table.
collaboration is real important in music, because I think as an artist, if you just stay in the same unit the whole time in the same genre, you kind of get stuck. But if you work with other people, then it kind of expands your mind and where you're going to go.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which I think is something that we're really keen to try and stick to, that idea of change and development and sort of almost a change in direction, sometimes changing concept, to explore the human condition in many different ways.
Video podcasting is like the next big thing. Audio is kind of really big. It's getting bigger all the time. But I've actually dabbled in a video version of the show where I actually interview bands and have the visual version of a podcast where it streams like live on Facebook. Unlike this version, it can't be streamed live. It's done like after the fact. But the technologies are getting better where you can actually. I've done maybe 4 episodes where I've actually interviewed bands visually in real time. So it's something we're working on, trying to get it better. We actually had a problem with because of the virus, the bandwidth got knocked down and the quality went down because everybody's home. And so in some situations, like the bandwidth wasn't what it used to be. So we had to kind of stop it because we couldn't get a good, the quality wasn't as good as what we wanted it to be. But we're looking into different ways to get better at that. So it's interesting you're getting into podcasting. Like we always encourage everybody to get into that because we think it's another way for artists to get out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and important at this time as well, I think, when everyone's maybe got more time or are needing more things to listen to and ways to connect with people. I think podcasting's quite popular.
And also as a band, it lets your audience really connect with you. Like if you, as a band, if you guys create a podcast, your fans can then kind of get more familiar with you, not just from every song you release on Spotify, but from actually hearing your voice and hearing you talk. It's kind of, it's a good vehicle. It's the same way, the Beatles use movies to connect with people with like Help and stuff. They connected with their fans and they got to like see that they're the Beatles because they got to see them on the screen. I think podcasting gives you the ability at, not expensive to do in this kind of market to be able to get out there and reach your your not your customer, but your fan base in a different way. It's more engaging and more likely that they won't turn it off. Which is cool as an artist. Like the more ways you can connect and actually get them to stay there and not jump to the next thing, that's always good.
Yeah, I think we could also say, like, if that fans should feel free to reach out to us if they want to, like, drop us a message on Instagram, or if there's something you're interested, you want to show us about dreams or
we also on this podcast we have the ability to have a voice memo, and so anybody who listens to this on Anchor FM can actually drop a voice memo to the podcast and give us back their feedback of what they think about or questions for the band, and we can relay those back to you.
Okay, great.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
we have that ability. We haven't gotten a lot of success with people actually using it, but we'll try again and see if anybody uses it. So there's a voice memo button on every podcast episode, and for this podcast episode, if you want to relay things, we can get that back to you guys, and it becomes a file that we can send to you, like an MP3 WAV file. So it's kind of cool. We had maybe 1 or 2 bands that took advantage of it, but we'll see if we get more people to do it.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you guys want to talk about? I'd let you have your time back for your day. It's in the morning here. Well, not morning. It's like afternoon. It's like 1 o'clock. But anything else you want to tell your fans before we drop off? No.
keep dreaming. Hope that the dreams aren't too disturbing.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
So again,
and stay.
So this will be published within the next hour. Again, we're on 11 podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, Radio Public, Overcast, many more, 11 in total. We will link this to our Instagram and create a story. The cool thing about Instagram with this platform is we can actually link to the Spotify podcast through a highlight, and people will be able to hit that and go right to the Spotify podcast version of this show in this episode. And so we will push that up on our stories and our podcast platform on Instagram. And then you can share that in your stories if you want. And we will send the link to the Anchor FM and the Apple and the Spotify within the next hour for you guys to promote however you want. If you guys have more material coming out and you want to have another show, let us know, and we can schedule for another show to talk about whatever project you want to do.
Yeah, that would be
Sounds
great.
brilliant.
But thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your great
No,
questions.
you guys are, I only have one song to hear, but I love what I hear, and I'm looking forward to following you guys and pushing you guys out there because I really like what you're doing. And so, yeah, I'm very much into your sound. And we do collab with all kinds of artists. So if you're ever into that, we have a weird sound. It's whether or not it fits your motif. But yeah, we're always down to collab with anybody we talk to. So
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
talk to you,
Thank you so much.
talk to
It's
you
encouraging to
later. I know I'm going to have you on again. So look forward to that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great.
Great.
You have a
Thank
good
you so much.
night. Bye.
Yeah. Stay safe.